Hello and welcome to the live on Neurodivergence and Starseeds Part 4. So last week we talked and focused mostly on autism. Today we're going to talk more about ADHD. And of course, because ADHD is often co-occurring with autism, you will see people who are autistic who are also have ADHD. So this might apply to them as well. Or if you're watching and you resonate with some of the traits that we talked about last week, you might find today's live quite helpful as well. I'm going to specifically talk about how do you deal with it. So I'm just going to check the sound. Let me know in the chat how the sound is. Now let me know if there's any issues with the sound. I noticed in some of the previous live streams I had a setting on the streaming software that I'm using, OBS, that was set to default and not what it should have been. And so, it bothers me so much when the sound is off. So your feedback is greatly appreciated. So this might be the last live stream that I do on this topic. I might do one more because there is some aspects that I haven't really talked about yet that are somewhat interesting and pertinent. But originally I was planning this live to be the last live on this topic, and then planning to go on and talk about dopamine and the other similar hormones. And specifically, how does dopamine play into the picture of, say, for example, having ADHD? So this was particularly interesting to me, as well as just how we're really affected by those hormones in our system. So just focusing on that and bringing some awareness to that can help us bring more awareness in our daily lives about what systems and what hormones are being triggered and how that's affecting us. And that can bring us closer to the kind of life that we want to live. So as a preamble, before we get into the slides, I wanted to talk about the topic in general, because we talk about starseeds or lightworkers. So having this sense of spirituality, of a spiritual mission, and neurodivergence. So we have different perspectives. We're looking at, in earlier lives, I went and I had these lists about traits that I saw in both, or that I thought were somewhat similar. In the later lives on this topic, I've been really trying to get specific on the neurodivergence aspect of it. Yeah, thank you for everyone who is joining and watching, whether you're live or watching later. So the reason why I thought this topic was important, because I look back, and I even look back at the past year and even before that, and I was experiencing burnout, I was experiencing a lot of fatigue, I was experiencing emotional dysregulation, and these experiences were rather extreme. So I found the explanation of a spiritual aspect. For example, I am processing my past trauma. I am maybe even processing, a collective trauma. I'm processing trauma from ancestors. There was this spiritual meaning that was applied to it, or I applied a spiritual meaning to my experience because I didn't have another way to explain or justify what I was experiencing. And we need that level of cohesion, what's going on in our lives. We need that story to help us. So I had that story that was explaining that kind of phenomena in my life. Now, the trouble with this is that if you have a spiritual mission and you believe you have a spiritual mission, and part of that spiritual mission that you believe you have, because maybe you are explaining your reality, is that part of that mission is to clear this collective energy for other people. And this is taking a lot of energy from you in your life. It's preventing you from being able to have a good life for yourself. And because of this reason that you have, you may not be looking at other explanations or other options to explain why you're experiencing this. And the issue is, if that's just how it is, and there is no way to take action on it to make your life better, then you're kind of stuck. And you might stay stuck there. So I think it's really best for everyone to be able to have as stable and as functional as a life as possible. Now that's as possible because there's going to be aspects of our lives that we have trouble trying to be normal or be able to do what is generally accepted as healthy. So our healthy might look different from what is healthy for other people, and that's okay. But the more that we can take action towards creating the life that we want, the better for us. I think personally for me, the spirituality, it can be a bit of an escape. It can be a trap through that escape because you're not addressing maybe some of the root issues because you don't have knowledge or understanding of it. So, these aspects of burnout, of like being overwhelmed by stress, stimuli, executive function, struggling with executive function, emotional dysregulation, all of these are things that happen when you have autism, ADHD, or both. So I'm using here the general term of neurodivergent, and I talked more about that last week, where it generally refers to autism, ADHD, or both, and the associated other issues that can come along with those kind of things. We talked about dyslexia, I believe alexithymia, and I forget the rest of the ones that we talked about. I think the beautiful thing that can happen as we start to understand that all of us are built differently and wired differently is that we can have more acceptance for ourselves. So there is a known awareness that if you have just been trying to fit in, and this can be quite unconscious, you've been trying to fit in your whole life and you've been really struggling, but maybe not even realizing that other people's experience is different from your own, and they're not understanding that either, and there can be a judgment of being lazy, there can be a lot of blame and shame. So you're living like this, and maybe you discover, oh my gosh, like I'm neurodivergent. Like maybe I don't know exactly where I fall on the spectrum, but I can tell, this makes sense. This makes sense why I've been struggling. And there can be a process of both denial, like I feel like I don't fit in, like there's this level of imposter syndrome. And you can experience that both generally in your life, or you can have this imposter syndrome like, no, but like I've been functional enough in my life that, I don't fit into this category. Like I don't think that, almost like I deserve to identify with this because I haven't struggled that much. And then there can also be this level of almost reintegrating your perception from all your life experiences and seeing them in a new light, where, oh, Like, I'm not actually faulty. I misunderstood that situation, and I got a lot of lashback for it. Or, like, now I see, like, it can be like a social situation. A lot of the autistic criteria is around like the social situations, but for example, we're going to talk about with ADHD today, we're going to bring it up. It can associated symptoms, issues with driving, issues with money. There is that lack of inhibition. So those things play in too. So there can be a lot of shame around that, about not being able to manage money well. So, like, all these issues, and that you had a lot of internalized judgment for. There can also be a level of where you've always been trying to fit in, trying to please other people, trying to pretty much be someone you're not, and maybe there's this level of achievement for you. So, and that's what I feel that I felt, where I was trying to achieve a certain social status. I was trying to achieve this kind of outside perception of being successful, and is that who I truly am? I look back and think about even just making this channel, and I think a lot of that was tied into this trying to obtain this outside perception of success and judging myself based on that. And now I'm feeling this disorientation about, why am I here? Why am I doing this channel? And there is this deconstruction that's happening for me, and the necessity of reconstructing new meaning to why I'm doing this. And it's associated with this feeling of, well, maybe I should just quit. Maybe I should give up. Like, how is this benefiting me? And also this level of feeling like it's not benefiting anyone else too. So there's that imposter syndrome that's showing up there, and also some heavy emotions that are showing up, reprocessing the events of my life and releasing that shame around struggles with dating, relationships, my professional life, and school. And a lot of the struggle was around social interaction. So it's amazing that there was this striving, even in the past couple of years, to try and fit into this mold of getting married and having kids, having a nice house. And I'm feeling that disintegrate too. So that construct of this happy family, like, that's being deconstructed, and I can feel the need to not have that anymore. Also, the pressure to date, that's falling apart and being deconstructed as well. So this is, like, it's interesting, it's a challenge, and it's also, it's a relief. I don't have to play that social role anymore. So it's a period of transition, and it's kind of a challenge within that period. And it's not as if, it's leading to a good place, but it's also hard because, like, there's those intense emotions that are coming up. So some of the things that I haven't talked about is sometimes, like, with people who get an autism diagnosis, they will get neural pruning, and they will actually get worse at some things. They've developed these skills, and they will get worse at some things, because sometimes what happens is you let go something that was part of your identity that you thought you were, that you realized that's not me anymore, that was me masking. And so there are things that are dropping away, and then you're losing aspects of yourself, of your identity. You are mourning the past self that really had to struggle and go through some hard times. If you didn't have the support, which a lot of people don't, you didn't have the support that you needed. So, yeah, it's interesting that you increase your awareness, and sometimes some things can get harder before they get better. But hopefully today we're going to talk about ADHD and be very specific about providing some direction in terms of what you can do about it and some of the practical steps that you can take. So I'm not giving a rule book, I'm just providing some direction. And on the two videos, or actually there's 3 videos, but 2 main channels that I used today as references, you can go to those videos and investigate more and find more resources via those channels. Okay, so we're actually going to get started now on the content. Okay, so we're going to start with what is ADHD. And we're going to look at a video done by the Healthy Gamer GG channel. And this is a licensed doctor. His name is, I've heard him say Dr. K. I don't know what his full name is. And so he's a psychiatrist, and I believe he has been diagnosed with ADHD. So he's very familiar with ADHD, not familiar, as far as I know, with autism. So ADHD is an attention disorder, and he also said it's a neurodevelopmental brain disorder. Of course, you can think oh, disorder, that's offensive. I mean, that's what he said. But you can think about it as, the brain develops differently. And it is a disorder to the extent where it impairs function. Of course, there's some other aspects that are advantageous to be able to think differently. But what we're discussing here are the disadvantages. So the frontal lobes of the brain develop differently, and this is the area that's responsible for executive function. And executive function is the ability to plan and execute tasks. So that's basically our daily life. We've got a lot of tasks that we need to do just to live. Also, difficulty sequencing tasks. So maybe you can focus on one task and get it done, but trying to line up a sequence of tasks is really challenging. And we're going to see what kind of role and challenge this shows up as. So you've got this situation where you can only hold one task in mind at a time, can't swap out tasks. And if you switch focus to another task, the initial task gets dropped. Otherwise, being neurotypical or not having ADHD, you're able to hold multiple tasks in the mind at a time. And you can drop one task, keep it in mind, move on to another task, and come back to that task. However, with ADHD, if you switch focus to another task, the initial task has a risk of getting dropped and being forgotten. So if you get distracted, when you move to another task, you may not remember the initial task. So this is really frustrating. And so let's say you have one important task that's later on in the day. There are people who avoid doing any other tasks until they complete that one task. And then maybe if it's a big event or something, then if it's something that takes up enough energy, they might be exhausted from that and then take the rest of the day off too. So then we see a productivity issue here. And this is colloquially called ADHD paralysis. So I really liked the description that he gave about this concept. And you have to remember, this is the brain functioning in a different way. We expect most brains to function in this specific way, and some people's brains do not function in this way. Okay, so the first slide was on the ADHD paralysis. Okay, so now we're talking about, this inattention and stimulus. So the more boring of an environment, where there's less stimulus, the worse ADHD symptoms become. And he talked about kids showing behavioral issues in low stimulus environments. So example, they're sitting on a chair in an empty room. So they're going to be fidgeting, moving around, maybe start making noise and talking to provide them stimulus. And so this can be seen as, they've got behavioral issues. They can't sit still in a classroom. So he's talked about this theory about an optimal level of function. So the optimal level of function lies between the base level and the upper level. So above a certain level of stimulus, it's going to be overwhelming. Below a certain level of stimulus, you can't focus. So, and you have people who are, or the theory goes that people will stimulate themselves to bring the stimulus up to the level of optimal function. So there's that range where they have the optimal level of stimulus. So maybe moving around, making noises. And I see this a lot in my workplace as well. As a reminder, my workplace or my work environment has a high proportion of people who are neurodivergent compared to the rest of the population. Because I work as a programmer. Interestingly enough, ADHD behaviors go down when you have an optimal level of stimulus. And one of the ways that they talked about, so this doctor is reacting to ADHD TikToks. So this TikTok was they're talking about white noise. Or actually they're talking about brown noise. But brown noise and white noise could provide a similar level of stimulus depending on what you prefer. And the amazing thing is discovering how do you create that optimal level of stimulus, bringing up the stimulus so you can focus. So this can be a really amazing, incredible discovery. So the issue that comes up is that if you have too much stimulus, it's going to create a problem. So you've got this optimal level. Above the optimal level of stimulus, if it's too much, you can't cope. So someone with ADHD will experience this where they get bombarded with stimuli. There's too many things in the environment that are asking for their attention. It's overwhelming. So one thing you can do here is try to remove distracting stimulus. And an issue that comes up is that technology provides a problem. You end up reaching for your phone for stimulus, but then there's too many distractions there, and then you're not able to get work done. And of course, social media is designed pretty much to hijack the ADHD brain. If you're overstimulated, it's going to distract you. So one thing you can work on is trying to work in clean spaces. And if you're understimulated, try to create more stimulus. And be smart about this. Think about what can I do that is not going to lead to further distractions. So if you're going to use your phone, be very specific about it. Like maybe I'll use a specific app, or if you can avoid going and selecting the apps maybe unconsciously that are quite distracting. But even if you can avoid using your phone at all and maybe use another tool. So this is like about finding your optimal stimulus balance. So this is an idea, so you can think about it and think about what might work for you, and also recognize what's not working for you. Okay, so another aspect, I've got a different video here. This is the part 3 of the same series. And I thought that he mentioned something really interesting, is that they've got these TikTok videos, and of course you're going to have YouTube videos that are going to lack accuracy as well. But if you have like a 1-minute video, you can have an issue where, it's not going into depth and explaining the concept clearly because of a lack of time. And so you've got these, when you look up TikToks related to ADHD, you're going to see like all these different symptoms. Now, he specifies, the main thing is inattention. And of course, the way the frontal lobe of the brain has developed. But you've got all these other things that show up in your life as a result of having ADHD indirectly. However, he was mentioning how there can be this confusion where you're conflating other symptoms with ADHD. So, for example, conflating ADHD with a fear of rejection. Now he's saying, if ADHD causes a fear of rejection, then treating ADHD should treat that as well. But it doesn't. So the ADHD is separate from the fear of rejection. So as a result of having untreated ADHD, you can have missed job opportunities, friendships, as a result of inattention. So maybe not paying attention in conversations. However, you're going to have to seek other kind of treatment to address the other issues. And those things will not improve right away, right? You've got years that have led up to that. So what also happens is people have depression and anxiety who have been living with untreated ADHD. Now, this depression and anxiety can arise as a result of indirectly having ADHD, but it's not directly a symptom of ADHD. So there's this chain where having ADHD, maybe you function differently, there can be this social isolation that happens, and people can label you as being off. There's that level of inattention that can lead to depression. And so it's a considerable issue. And there is this very high comorbidity between ADHD and depression. So having ADHD as a kid, there's a 70% chance of depression as an adult. So if you have depression as a kid, there isn't that same relationship having, or at least being diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. And of course we know that, diagnosis as an adult, it's showing up more now, but there has always been this tendency to emphasize children and diagnose children, and an attitude of like, why as an adult do you need a diagnosis? But of course, as we'll see later, like ADHD is treatable. There is medication for it, and it can make a huge difference in your life. And of course, like what I'm saying crosses over more to autism probably, because with ADHD you do have that treatment that's available with autism. There is no pill that you can take to essentially fix it. So there is more of that attitude perhaps towards someone who has autism. I've also seen like the symptoms of autism and ADHD. If you have both, they can kind of hide the symptoms of just having one. So that basically, like, there's issues with being diagnosed as an adult if you already look as if you're somewhat functioning. Because in his video, like, Dr. K was mentioning the stats on having ADHD or as an adult and having depression as a kid, and I don't think that comparison directly provides a good contrast, because the process of diagnosis for depression and ADHD, like as an adult, is slightly different factors from what I know. So he's saying fear of rejection and abandonment is not a part of ADHD. It's a separate process that can be a consequence of growing up with untreated ADHD. So how does that untreated ADHD lead to depression? Well, you can have consequences of lower academic achievement, lower social connections, less positive attention from teachers, and inability to participate in work social situations, less advancement in your job, less promotion, and lower wages. And then feeling behind other people in life. So here is a pathway, some scenarios or examples why depression might occur more often in people with ADHD. So he was really specifying and making clear, treating ADHD will not resolve the other issues caused by the buildup of past issues, which are indirectly caused by ADHD. So he was concerned about conflating the different issues. Okay, so he also was talking about ADHD at work. So some of the issues that come up: oversharing in team meetings due to impulsivity, careless mistakes from inattention, taking on too much responsibility. And he said, there's some reasons for this, maybe trying to bank brownie points to make up for those careless mistakes. There's also the aspect of just taking on too much responsibility due to impulsivity, because the frontal lobes, because they've developed differently, are not as good at planning and executing tasks. So you think, well, okay, yeah, I can do that, like that's easy, but your brain's not able to think about like, oh wait, actually, that's going to take a lot of time and energy and resources, and to be able to do this, we need to be able to do this. So it's not able to sequence out those tasks. So the other part that I talked about was the compensatory responsibility. And if you're trying to make up for, mistakes from the past, you're setting yourself up for failure. So this is not a good strategy. So discussing more about not being good about sequencing out tasks. So there's the struggle with failure to correctly assess difficulty of projects and how much of your time and effort they will take. So having poor resource management assessment skills. So like there's that level of planning and foresight that like that part of the brain is just not developed the same way. And he was mentioning another thing. So there are people with ADHD, they can have this inattention, but sometimes they can harness their focus and be extremely productive. And it's almost like trying to win the lottery. Like they think like, oh, you know what? I know I can be super, super productive if I just get into that zone where I'm very focused and I can get a lot of stuff done in a short amount of time. And Dr. K was saying how that's not predictable and that's not a good way to plan out your life, just hoping that you're going to be able to focus. Okay, so another aspect of having ADHD in the workplace is there can be this tendency to get overwhelmed, which is a struggle. Also, so like there's that stimulus, right? Like there's that overwhelm. And then there is requiring enough stimulus. There's also the strategy of trying to use the last minute panic to increase effort. And it's almost like you're trying to use that stress level to get your brain to focus. And of course, it would be better if you had artificial deadlines before you get to that point, so you have less stress, because that level of stress, it can be, some people, they can get through life and they can work like that, but there's going to be some cases where that's not going to work. Okay, so another struggle of having ADHD in the workplace is spending a lot more time trying to get work done because of the inattention. And when he was talking about treatment, so when you're going to therapy, a lot of the therapy can revolve around developing organizational and focus skills, and we'll talk about that more in the next set of slides. And he said it's less about going into your feelings and what most people imagine therapy as. And I imagine it being having an accountability partner, basically. The therapist is acting as an accountability partner, and you're talking about, okay, well, what worked and what didn't work for you, and these are some kind of strategies that you can use. Okay, another aspect of ADHD at work is having disagreements and arguments with coworkers, and he mentioned this can be a symptom of the emotional dysregulation subtype of ADHD. So I hadn't heard about that before. I had heard about the general symptom of emotional dysregulation associated in general, I think, with autism and ADHD. So I've heard that it's associated with both, but I haven't heard about this specific subtype of ADHD before. So that was new to me. And another aspect of having issues with people at work, maybe an issue of paying attention to what other people are saying, and maybe a difficulty in articulating yourself. So if it's an issue with paying attention to what other people are saying, he was saying that you can get medication, and so that can resolve those kinds of issues. So this, here we're on to the next set of slides. So a new video. This is how you treat ADHD based off science. And it's a video of Dr. Russell Barkley presenting. So he does research on ADHD. So I thought this was really interesting and useful. So he was talking about knowing versus doing, and how, these two functions, they operate from and reside from different parts of the brain. So the front part of the brain is associated with knowing, and the back part of the brain is about doing. And he said ADHD splits them apart. So he used, I liked his language, and he sounded, different from a lot of other people who talk about these kind of things. I thought he has a good sense of humor. So he was saying it doesn't matter what you know, you can know what you need to do but won't do it because this knowing and doing it is separated. They're not connected. So ADHD interferes with executive function. And also you have time blindness. And this involves not being able to aim your behavior towards the future to care for yourself, which is an issue. He called it intention deficit disorder. The issue is with when and where, not what and how. So you can know what and how you need to do it. It's just the when and where, trying to implement that's the tricky part. And he was saying, like, all ADHD interventions must be in the place where you're not doing what you know you need to do. So the intervention can't just happen within a therapy appointment. Like, they have to take place in the environment where you operate, you work, you live. You need to create this scaffolding in your life. And he was saying teaching skills is inadequate because it's not, and it's also not a motivational problem. So you don't need to get more motivation. It's more about re-engineering your surrounding environment for executive deficits. And a lot of the times this requires help from other people. And of course, if you are socially isolated and you don't have other people to help you, of course, there's another issue too. Okay, so there's an issue with the delay of consequences. All important social consequences have a delay, and you need to be more accountable more often to more people. You need to bring consequences closer to you in time. So you need to add artificial consequences to your environment and shift your framework from an attention disorder to an executive disorder. You need to make the mental information physical. You need to make the internal external. So he's saying, do not depend on working memory. You need to externalize important information at key points of performance. So this is making the mental physical. Making cues, signs, charts, reminders, indicators in your visual field. So one way to do this is like having a journal or a notebook or using notes on your phone. When you think of something, get it out of your head, write it down. Creating a system, sticky notes. So let's say, for example, you've got a reminder app on your phone. So I started using a to-do list on my phone. So anytime something pops into my head, I put it on the to-do list. It's got a date in there. I also have a recurring events. So for example, paying my credit card, I put that in there. Water the plants, I put that in there. And I put them at like the water the plants at 1 week intervals, and then paying the credit card once every 2 weeks. So then if I miss it one time, at least at one point I will be able to catch it. I don't want to put it just once a month because I might miss it. And then the nice thing about it is you like check it and cross it off, and it shows you, okay, you completed this task today. If you were going to use something like that on your phone, what you also need is a reminder to check your phone. So you might also need like a sign or like a sticky note saying, make sure to check your phone. Like to-do list for today, check your phone, in somewhere in your visual field. So like around your bed, around your nightstand, in the bathroom, maybe the kitchen table, maybe in multiple places. So you could organize your life with your phone, if it's something that you always have with you. But that might not be enough. You might also need reminders to check your phone. So if something's not working for you, you need to go into it at a greater level of detail. You need to make sure, okay, I'm not the bad person for not doing this. The system that I'm using must be flawed in some way and is not meeting my needs. So I need to add to this system and not just judge myself. So you also need to externalize time and time periods related to tasks and important deadlines. So using clocks, timers, counters. So it might be helpful to have a digital or a physical clock in your environment that you see. Watch minders, things that allow you seeing time passing and allow you to judge your performance. You see time passing, like, oh, I was supposed to do that, I haven't done it yet. Oh, I have an appointment in an hour. Right, I need to get ready for that. I need to make sure that I am ready for that. So maybe I need to make sure that I'm not going to overwork. So let's say you have an appointment after work, or you're getting off work early. So you notice, like, okay, it's an hour before work ends, but my appointment is exactly at that time, so maybe I need to leave in half an hour to get ready to leave. Maybe I need to stop working in 15 minutes so I can actually get all my stuff and get out the door. So then, to make sure that I stop working in 15 minutes, I might need to set an alarm. So you might need to take these additional steps for yourself. And I'm currently thinking about, like, how can I apply these kind of things in my life to get done what I need to get done. And yeah, being on time is a struggle. Another thing you want to do, break up lengthy tasks or ones spanning long periods of time into many small steps. So the app that I use, I can put a big task and then I can put subtasks on it. And each time I complete a subtask, I can cross it off. And this is helping me to, instead of avoiding a task, because I don't, like, it's too big and it's daunting and I don't have the energy to deal with that big daunting task right now. If I break it down into tasks, I realize, oh, you know what, there's actually an easy subtask that is low effort that I can actually do right away, and that I didn't realize. That would bring me closer towards the bigger task, and instead of just avoiding this big task, I actually start working towards it before I get to when I really need to do it, and I might not have enough time to complete the big task. So when you have big long tasks, or tasks or projects that span a long period of time, you want to get rid of time. So just break it up into small steps. And of course, this is tricky. This takes a lot of work. And maybe if you spend time taking a task and breaking it up, maybe you can make a template. So you put the effort into breaking something up into small tasks. Maybe you can create a template and you can reuse that process or those things that you broke that task up into, so that you can devote less mental energy to doing that function later, because actually breaking stuff up into tasks takes a lot of focus and mental energy. Or maybe you could have someone help you with that. You want to create these baby steps over the bridge of time. Get a little bit of work done frequently over time. So I'm really bad for this. I avoid tasks I need to do at work because I think, you know what, they take too much mental energy. I don't want to do that right now. And I just avoid thinking about it. Just procrastinate it and avoid it.
instead of thinking, you know what, okay, what are the subtasks, and what subtask is small enough and easy enough that I could do it with the focus and energy that I have right now. So this is something that I am going to be focusing on and working really hard on, because this is affecting my productivity, because I tend to going for those big tasks when I feel really good, and it happens maybe once a week if I'm lucky. And unfortunately, a lot of what I do is complex, and it requires a lot of mental energy, so I tend to avoid a lot of work, which is not good, and I feel bad about myself, and I'm not happy with it, and I feel like I'm not deserving or worthy of my job. And you don't want to be basing self-judgments on that, because just being able to recognize, you know what, okay, I can build up this skill of breaking stuff up into smaller tasks, and by doing that, I can actually develop a framework for myself where I know, like, I'm talented and smart and competent, like, I can do so much more. Because you can be in this dilemma where you know, like, I can do so much more with your life, but then you're struggling. At the very least, you want to get out of, these different areas that create problems for you to where you're not struggling anymore. And then from there you can thrive. So I'm not minimizing the difficulty of this suggestion, and it is tricky. Like, it's kind of like, yeah, you know what you need to do? You need to set goals that are smart, that are specific and measurable and time-bound, and this is hard. This is hard. Like, okay, but how? But how do you do that? Could you maybe expend some mental energy to show me how to do that? Because I don't see a way forward. Like, I remember being a teenager and having someone give us a talk to our ski team about how to set goals, and it was pretty much useless. I was like, oh wow, such a great idea, but did we ever do it? No. No, because these are skills that you have to learn. And maybe, this just occurred to me, maybe this can be an issue with, okay, well, yeah, I know, but there's an element of doing. So there's that aspect there. So, book reports and science projects are examples of things that involve delays, are big projects spread over a long period of time, that are things that aren't going to happen on your own. So these are things that require help. And he mentioned how, like, with ADHD, like, you can't handle delays. So I'm going to relate my experience to this, but I will say my experience that I'm describing is not directly related to this issue. This just triggered this in my mind. So I'm not using this as an example for this, but I'm thinking about how things that are a struggle for me, like, for example, with work, sometimes I need access to certain secure files, and I need certain people to have access to those files, and I don't have control over that. Infrastructure has control over that, and there's a time delay with that. There's another issue with setting up a test environment for the specific project where, like, there's two paths forward. One path involves getting a new virtual machine, which, again, we have to go through infrastructure to get that. The other path forward is adapting the existing WebDriver, which currently, for that I know I'm getting technical, but for that virtual machine, it applies to everything on that virtual machine. So we need this WebDriver we only want it to apply this to this testing project because it affects the web scraping for that project. So if we can't get the new virtual machine, and of course, that costs money, then we have to figure out something we don't know how to do. We don't know if it's possible. We suspect. So we've already invested like several hours into this. So you see, like, there's the challenge, right? So it doesn't matter. Either way forward, there's a delay. And guess what? It's been like a couple of weeks. We kind of shelved that, have not touched it. And you can see why. It's like, and the other person I'm working with on this is a senior developer. They know they have ADHD. It's fairly obvious. But I'm the same way. I'm like, oh, forget it. I'm not doing it. He did invest some time into looking into it, but then I think he forgot about it. Like, so another task came priority over this one, and he dropped it and then focused on the other task and completely forgot about this. And of course, like, I remember it, but I don't want to do it because it involves delays, because like you can't get it done in the now. It's like, it feels like this path forward is really ambiguous. Like, I don't see the path, like the steps and the path. It's like, so let's say you have a stone path and you have like stones on the path that are leading you forward. This is like, it's just foggy. And it's like, requires too much effort and willpower. Procrastination is often linked to the fear of task failure. Yeah. And that's the thing, like, if you can't get it done, then it's like, why am I working on it? There can be this aspect of like, why am I working on it? And I want to work on something that I'm going to get results for. Dividing tasks into reasonable bites enables us to see success and adjust for the dynamic of typical setbacks. Exactly. That's described so well. Focusing on the end state provides for a success template that can be tailored and adjusted without losing focus on your final goals. Oh yeah, completely. I use these techniques in all simple and complex tasks. Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Because I think like that's where I'm at too. I'm having to learn how to describe, what do I really want here? And is what I'm doing contributing towards that? And also breaking it down into the small steps. Yeah, it's not fun if you're like, I don't know how to do this, I can't get this done. It can be this element of feeling incompetent, this lack of feeling good about yourself. Like, I don't know how to do this. Whenever you're confronted with something like, I don't know how to do this, like it's too unfamiliar from you, like we tend to avoid it because it forces us to confront that level of insecurity in ourselves. And there's always something in our lives that can bring that up for us. Like, for example, for me, like grad school just brought this up for me so strongly, but it's like, it was too far away from my skill set and what I was familiar with. Yeah, so you need to get rid of the delay and bring it back to the now, doing a baby step a day. And this isn't easy, right? This is where like accountability comes in. And at my workplace, we are getting new benefits, and part of the benefits is getting therapy. And I like it because you can choose your own therapist and they will reimburse the therapist. So I much prefer that than having like, oh, so we are providing the therapist and you don't get to choose, and you're talking to this person that you have to be really vulnerable with, and like you don't know their background. I was unwilling to engage in that kind of dynamic. But if I get to have some control over it, where I get to choose, because therapy can really be an uncomfortable thing. If you're neurodivergent and therapy is this social situation that you're not familiar with, you don't know the social rules, it can be extremely anxiety inducing. And I'm already experiencing anxiety, because I thought, you know what, I'm gonna do the therapy, but I'm experiencing like some of that anxiety around it. Like I keep imagining scenarios with that and projecting negative things happening with this, and I can recognize, okay, you know what, I know that's anxiety talking, and it's also possible that it could go wonderfully and beautifully, and it's okay if it doesn't go well, because you can leave and find someone new and you're not paying for it. So that'll be interesting. Okay, so an important thing with ADHD is externalizing sources of motivation. Don't depend on yourself to create internal motivation. Make motivation external. Like, if you have ADHD, you're often dependent on the environment for motivation. Now, this makes me think of how ADHD and autism can sometimes be misdiagnosed or misunderstood as other conditions. Something I've heard of is autism being misunderstood as being narcissistic, being very self-focused. So something that just came to mind as I was reading this, being dependent on the environment for motivation. So an aspect of narcissistic personality disorder is being dependent on other people for sources of supply, emotional supply, not being able to get that internally. Now, if you're dependent on the environment for motivation, I can imagine in certain situations this can look narcissistic, where you're depending on other people for your motivation, or you're almost seeking supply from them. So this is just a little example that came to mind that might be applicable. It's just a theory. So you have to put consequences in the now. And the interesting thing is that video games does this well, homework does not do this well at all. I mean, if you have video games, which are basically homework, that works, right? But it costs money. It costs a lot of money to develop video games. I think that would be kind of cool. But if you're using like this video game format for doing homework, you have to make sure there's no other distractions or no ability to play other video games. Okay, another aspect of ADHD, you need to externalize mental problem solving. So there's this difficulty with mental manipulations. Okay, so this is very much related to education again. You can't hold things in mind and move them around as well as others. So if you're doing math, use marbles, use a number line, use an abacus. And this is the frustrating part, is people not understanding. I could just accommodate this student, this person, instead of expecting them to do it my way. And this is really frustrating. Consider your subject as artwork. Open with the final picture. develop a reasonable progression of what you want the final product to be, then work backwards to a logical starting point. Nice. Okay, so I believe you're talking about like breaking things into tasks. I was imagining, okay, I've got to start at the beginning and what do I need to do first? But this is like a backwards approach, which is helpful because if you break it down that way, it can provide a path forward. So let's say you've got your path through the woods, through the forest, and from your side it's foggy, but the end point, it's actually clear. So if you start, let's say the cabin that you're going to, it's actually clear from that end. So you start from that end, you work backwards, and maybe you can lift. Maybe the cabin at the other end has a flashlight. You can use the flashlight through the fog to illuminate the path stones. Okay, so I'm going to bring this up before I forget it, because I'm probably going to forget it. Okay, this refusal of people to accommodate others when it wouldn't cost them that much. There's this stubbornness about it. This makes me really, really upset. And I also acknowledge there is this level of lack of awareness. Of course, people can be just like straight up rude and have that personality type where they're disagreeable in a way where they're stubborn and they don't want to accommodate other people. There is this level of what would I call it? I think like needing to be right and I'm not sure. I could sit here thinking for a while, thinking about like what, how to describe that. But you will encounter these people who are unwilling to accommodate you, and it can be extremely frustrating and upsetting because, and I had a situation yesterday where I thought I was following the social rules and I didn't understand why the rules had suddenly changed. And I look back and I think, how easy would it have been for the other person to bend their perception of the rules to accommodate me? And their unwillingness, I felt like I was dysfunctional and wrong and embarrassed that I broke the rules. But looking back, I was like, well, I didn't do anything wrong. But other people can have this attitude where, intentionally or not, they make you feel bad about yourself. Now, I like to look at this. I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about, our life. I used to play this game, like this hospital game is pretty old, but like it had like a top-down view, and you built this hospital, and it's this game, right? And like things happen in the game that aren't pleasant, but you're not taking it personally. And I've really felt like that, kind of like, us living this game. And you can think about like other people as NPCs. This is what I was imagining. Stop. To avoid giving importance to other people, you almost have to treat them as NPCs within your own mind. And everyone does this unconsciously. People treat other people as NPCs unconsciously all the time. And if you are, I want to say, you're conscientious, you're trying, when people do this to you, it can really rub you the wrong way. Right? Like there's that thick skin and being too sensitive. Releasing that that anger and that frustration for people who can be rude, insensitive to you, when you think like it wouldn't have cost them that much just to be kind and generous to you. That's okay. And I like to think about it as this kind of game, and we're experiencing this game and releasing that importance of these other people. Yeah, using the backwards approach will give you a tangible box or guardrail to keep your task on point. Too many people surrender to the ADHD diagnosis as an impediment. It is not. It can be made into a gift if we don't allow ourselves to be considered a victim of circumstance. Yeah, and that can happen with a lot of things. Yeah, so like an interesting thing that Dr. K said was that ADHD is both overdiagnosed and underdiagnosed. So you had people just diagnosing, especially young boys, with ADHD when, like I've taught piano to young boys, and they don't like to sit still for long periods of time, which you're expecting them to do in a classroom. And there's a certain element to that is normal and natural. So if you've got like these high ratios of kids to a teacher in a classroom, there's like this overdiagnosis of ADHD. However, it's also undiagnosed because the people who actually have ADHD just go unnoticed and don't get help and don't get treatment. So there is medication that is effective for ADHD that you can get if you're diagnosed. And then there's these other accommodations that you can provide for yourself, also with the help of other people. And of course, like the more help you can get with it, the better. Some people have more help than others. Of course, like for example, for me, like if your job provides as part of your benefits therapy, you don't have to go into therapy and be super emotionally vulnerable and almost like get dragged down into like past issues that aren't part of your life anymore. You can use it as a way to develop. You can be right up front about like, this is what I want from these sessions. These are the things that I'm struggling with. And I want help to, break things into smaller tasks, organizational skills and tools and tactics and ideas about how I can do this, and also accountability. Oh, this makes me think about like piano lessons. When I was younger, I remember this so clearly, coming to the piano lesson and thinking, where did the week go? I'm going to practice this week, being so embarrassed because I didn't practice and the teacher knew it. And she let me know about it. I'm like, I'm going to practice this week. Another week goes by. I show up at the piano lesson. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's been a week and I haven't practiced. Like, what happened? Okay, so for NPC, so it's N as a name, PC. It's a non-player character. So like in a video game, you have these non-player characters, which are, I guess like you've got the character that you're playing, that you're animating, and then there's the other characters in the game which don't have like a human consciousness animating them and making their decisions. So it's like this concept extended from video games. So there is the idea that other people in reality actually are non-player characters. They're kind of like bodies that are driven by impulses, and they don't have a consciousness. And I think some people have not a lot of consciousness. And of course, there's issues with taking this too literally and using it as a justification to treat other people badly. I'm using it in the context of releasing the impact of what other people do have on you. Seeing them as, you know what, they don't matter that much. And this was a way for me to think of it that way and like try to desensitize myself to like this very emotionally dysregulating event. Okay, so we're coming up to like a really important part of, of this video that I thought was really helpful. Okay, replenishing the resource pool of willpower. So your willpower is not infinite. You have a limited amount. And he says, this executive system has a limited fuel tank. You can spend it really quickly. So every time you use an executive function and you use it continuously, you drain the tank. Now, the more energy you have to expend doing these executive functions, the quicker you drain the tank. And once you get to the bottom of the tank, you lose self-control. So if you've used up your entire tank at work, you come home from work, and you're like, yeah, I should go to the gym. I should eat healthy. Like, I should cook dinner. But you know what? I'm just going to veg out at home and eat takeout. That's why. Because you've drained your tank. And you can morally should yourself into like, yeah, I should. But nothing's going to change. Some of my strongest and most brilliant crew members have heavy-duty ADHD. I often have to look them straight in the eye and say focus to reset the wandering minds back on track. Yeah. So you're accommodating them. You recognize, okay, like they're not insulting me. You're not taking offense to what they're doing. You're not demeaning or downplaying their ability or their competence, but you're recognizing, you know what, they need this help and support to do their job. And we can't expect everyone to do that for us, but it's beautiful when we can do that for ourselves and for others. Okay, so I've heard the term executive function a lot, and we have some general examples about what executive function is. So in things like inhibition and self-restraint. So you can be spending a lot of energy inhibiting your behavior. So let's say stimming. Let's say someone has ADHD. People who are autistic do stimming as well as kind of a soothing behavior. So it can be like flapping hands, kind of like movement that is not like, it can be even like tapping on a desk. It can be like bouncing the knee, and people can interpret that as like weird or strained or as if you're not listening. But like we said before, like you might need that level of stimulation to be able to focus. And if you are inhibiting, if you're trying to focus and you're inhibiting self-stimming behavior, so stimming behavior in ADHD, it can be increasing stimulation so you can focus. In autism, it can be trying to regulate, self-regulate. So it provides this level of self-soothing. If you're inhibiting that, that's going to take a lot of extra energy, so that can drain this willpower tank quite quickly. And also self-restraint. You're trying to avoid blurting out something inappropriate, for example, at work or in a social situation. So this can make social situations really draining. Okay, so another executive function example. Self-management in regards to time. Being on time. Yep, definitely a struggle. Like, it's always a struggle for my mom too. We were often not on time, and it's interesting, if you grew up in that household, there's not a lot of judgment against it, although I do feel bad. I do try and be on time now. I had a chiropractor appointment, and on my way to the chiropractor appointment, I realized I didn't actually know where I was going. So I pull out my phone, and I looked up the address, and I'm trying to follow the map, and I end up going further away from in the direction of where I need to be. I look at the map again, and I'm really confused, and I'm freaking out because I don't know how to get there. I'm like, can't read the map. I'm like, I thought I could read maps. So I kind of get in the area, I find a place to park, and I'm like, just start running in the general direction and looking for like landmarks that were on the map. And this worked. I got there like 1 minute in time before the appointment, which was later than I planned to go there, but man, that was a little bit stressful. I think like I was missing the part of the task. Like I got getting in the car and driving. I got that section on time. The part that I did not get was the directions. Like the Google Maps was saying like head north, and I'm like, where's north? I don't know. I guess using Google Maps takes skills too. I haven't used it before. Okay, so I'm like, there's that like planning out this task that I completely missed. That I've noticed that I've struggled with, like going to a new place. So another executive function example, emotional self-regulation. This one is so hard. Something triggers you and you just like have this huge emotional response. This happened so much this week. And it's hard to get back on track. Like I can't refocus on work if something happens. And self-motivation. Yep. If I don't feel like doing it, no. But of course, like that not feeling like doing it is like, oh, the task is a huge task, right? And I didn't break it down. When we realize that perpetual tardiness equates to a lack of respect to those who are waiting while we are wasting their valuable time. Yeah, so there's that consequence. There's that social consequence. I'll send you a compass and a flare gun. Oh my gosh. Maybe I should get a compass. Because I'm hiking. My sister told me like, okay, this year on our kayak trip, we're going to navigate by compass. I'm like, are you serious? I don't think this is going to go well. Okay, so another important thing is recognizing what boosts the willpower tank. So we have some examples here. So rewards. I think I saw a video on the little treat culture. Someone was saying little treat culture is getting out of hand, like buying an $8 coffee, like this is ridiculous. And someone responded and they said, sounds like someone needs a little treat. I don't buy $8 coffee, and it's way too much sugar. I can see how it'd be nice though. Positive emotions boost the willpower tank. Statements of self-efficacy and encouragement. So that's like affirmations. 10-minute breaks between executive function tasks and tasks that require self-restraint or willpower. And these 10-minute breaks can include relaxation or meditation, visualizing and talking about future rewards. Physical exercise is super helpful for people with ADHD, and glucose ingestion. So there used to be this perspective that, sugar is bad for people with ADHD, but I think it's like the amount of sugar. So like a little bit can help you focus. If you eat too much, of course, that's not good. Dr. Russell Barkley, and this is the guy who's talking in this video, said that exercise benefits ADHD more than any other psychiatric disorder. Like we hear about like how, with depression you need to exercise, but like exercise actually benefits ADHD more than depression. I mean, of course, it'll help depression too, as long as, you don't have severe clinical depression. Like with mild and moderate, you can exercise, but with severe clinical depression, you might not even be able to exercise. So blood glucose in the frontal lobe is directly correlated with executive abilities. Yeah, so just a little bit of sugar, some snacks. And I think it depends how quickly you want the glucose to get to the brain, like the fluid form gets to the brain the most quickly. But if you have snacks and you have like a more complex carb, like that glucose will eventually get to the brain. It'll just take more time. So the executive system is a complex multi-level system, and there's just not one level of cognition. And ADHD disrupts behavioral inhibition and that internalized part of executive function. Consider meeting your objectives as your little treat. It won't get you fat and saves the gas money to find your destination as you wander around looking for your destination. Okay, so ADHD affects self-restraint and inhibiting behavior, thoughts, and words and emotions. Self-management to time, so anticipating and preparing for the future. Self-organization and problem-solving across time. Self-motivation across time. Self-regulation of emotions across time. Building friendships and networks. Money management and driving. So the thing we didn't mention as far as things that you can work on to help yourself is incorporating strategies for emotional regulation. So that was mentioned on in his slides, in his video, but he didn't go into it on any depth. But that's an important point there. So today we went over various points about where do you start in terms of thinking about like how can I make my life easier for myself and make myself more functional. So I'm going to be working on some of these areas, and I'm hoping that I started writing out a list of goals, and I've been thinking about I might break those goals into smaller tasks about like what I can do about them on a daily basis, and then keeping a record of doing those things on a daily basis. So I'm also thinking about like how do I incorporate like work and home, because I like having like the small tasks on that list and then crossing them off, and I like having it digital because like paper gets lost and I leave stuff somewhere and then find it later and don't have it when I need it. Otherwise, like, I always have my phone with me. And yeah, it's gratifying, like, feeling like, yes, I'm functional, like, I got this done. And yeah, I'm excited to discovering, wow, like, how I can probably, like, discard things that take up too much energy, that aren't contributing, to my goals. Discovering how I can build up that willpower tank, like, more often. So I'm not, like, crashing after work and completely losing all willpower. Also discovering how to use techniques for emotional regulation and also task switching, getting back on track when I got distracted or I need to jump into a new task. Yeah, so that was, I really liked, this part of the live stream series, because I thought these videos, the information in these videos was really helpful. And yeah, it's a good reminder for myself, like, this is what I want to work on. And I'm hoping that working on these things going forward is going to be able to give me more of, like, what I want in my life. Be able to have, like, a more enjoyable life. And I think rather than using spirituality to justify why my life isn't going well or isn't going the way I want, being able to address those issues and being able to enjoy spirituality as a part of my life, and it's not something that I'm kind of using as a crutch. And I don't think this negates any of my spiritual experiences, but just provides ideas and ways to, like, improve your life. Nice. Okay, so thank you for joining me, and we will have another live stream next week.